nature nut, I'm not afraid to admit. I'm wild about the wild things and I'm proud of it. I'm just a simple case, open and shut. No doubt about it, I'm a nature nut. Today we'll go bird watching, tomorrow we'll catch toads. The next day we'll take photographs of bugs along the road. I never get the feeling that I'm in a rut. That's why I'm a nature nut. Well, I'm a nature nut, I'm not afraid to admit. I'm wild about the wild things and I'm proud of it. I'm just a simple case, open and shut. No doubt about it, I'm a nature nut.
See them plants? Yep. Them's yuccas.
Well, hello there, nature nuts. So what the heck is a yucca? A yucca is a plant. This is a yucca right here, and today we're going to spend our time looking at yuccas. Yuccas are a very Western thing. You see them in all the old Western movies. It's a classic Western icon, a beautiful thing in its own right. But yuccas are also very interesting to those of us who are interested in nature. It's got this big, tall stalk of greenish white flowers and then fruit. And that leads all the way down to these, ouch! Spiky leaves. They're very spiky. Ouch! Seriously sharp leaves. If I was a javelina or a pronghorn, I probably wouldn't eat much yucca. This is very much a plant of dry environments, of deserts, of dry prairies and scrub, and you can see from these thin, spiky leaves that it's holding on to water. You don't find a lot of plants in this part of the world that have big, broad, floppy leaves. Those are the sorts of leaves you see on rainforest plants. Plants around here, they've got little tiny leaves or long, slender, spiky leaves. They also have a very deep root that goes way, way down into the ground to reach the water table and bring water up to the yucca. Got my water pistol here. It's a little plugged up, otherwise I'd give that yucca a drink. Anyway, I'm not much on plant watching, but the yucca is a focus of activity. There are lots and lots of creatures, and I'm talking little creatures, bugs, you know what I mean, that hang around yuccas. So we're going to spend some time in the world of the yucca, and I think you'll find it an intriguing place to be.
There are many species of yucca, including the Kanab yucca, which is the one shown here, and the Joshua tree. Okay, well here's a good-looking yucca, and one of my favorite things these days is to take the bug-watching binoculars with the 2-element close-up lens on them and just scan a plant and look for interesting insects on the plant. You couldn't pick a more interesting plant than a yucca. That's why we're here. Whoa, hey, we got a bit of a wind blowing here today. But you can see in this flower here, there are a couple of little white moths. That's the yucca moth, and the yucca moth has an amazingly interesting relationship with the yucca. They need each other. But let's not get into that right now. That's a special case. I want to talk about the normal sorts of everyday relationships between insects and plants that we can see here on this yucca. Oh, well, okay, there's a good place to start. See those little tiny sort of cigar-shaped things? Those are thrips. Thrips are plant-feeding insects. They're feeding in the flowers. If you're a gardener, you know all about thrips. You also know that there's no such thing as a thrip. It's always plural. Thrips. There's a thrips. There's some more thrips. They're just here to thrip you up. That's thrips for you. And there are lots and lots of aphids on this plant here as well. Aphids are not particularly interesting to watch, but they're doing the same thing as the thrips, sticking their little beaks into the plant, sucking up the juices. That's where they get their food. They also exude honeydew from 2 little horns off the back end. Ants come and collect the honeydew. I haven't seen any ants yet today. I think they're still sleeping in, but you can see this big hairy, wacky-looking fly here. Oh, that's a dandy fly. That fly is probably here just to sip on the honeydew and to bask on the beauty of the white yucca blossom. Lovely. Now there's another thing I want to show you down here in the spiky leaves. Ow! Down here. Okay, right down in here we've got some more plant-feeding bugs, true bugs as they say, and they are drilling their little beaks into the leaves rather than into the flowers. I mean, the flowers are probably easier to get juice out of, but the flowers are crowded, so why not drill into the leaves? These gotta be tough little bugs. They look like plant bugs to me in the family Myridae. If I'm wrong, send me a letter, tell me different. And hey, that's how they make their living. This yucca is a beehive of activity, but you'll notice there are no bees here. We'll come back to that. Well, let's see what else I can show you here. Oh, see that yucca over there? At the base, there's a lizard taking refuge among the spiky leaves. If I was a lizard, that's exactly where I'd hang out. There's no way that a hawk's gonna come screaming out of the sky and grab you there, because the hawk would impale itself on the spikes. In fact, have a look down here. The weight of a single flower falling off the stalk, it's enough to impale the flower on the spike. That's pretty prickly stuff. There's also a ladybug on this flower. It's a convergent ladybug. You see the two converging lines on the black shield behind the head, the pronotum. Beautiful thing. And of course the ladybugs will be feeding on the aphids. There's a ladybug larva here on this blossom. Oh, and down there among the leaves again, there's a ladybug pupa. So we probably got just about the whole ladybug life cycle here. And actually I noticed some eggs. See those eggs? Those might be ladybug eggs. I don't know. They're the right color, they're orange, they're the right size. Boy, you think recognizing bugs is tough? Try recognizing bug eggs. It's a whole science unto itself. Now, if you were trying to grow yuccas, you would consider some of these insects to be yucca pests. You'd consider the ladybugs to be the helpful insects. Basically what you're looking at here, the good, the bad, and the yucca. You know, I have to admit to you, I'm no veteran of this yucca thing. This is the first time in my entire life that I've spent any time at all exploring the world of the yucca and the yucca moth, but I'm having a great time. I'm learning all sorts of new things, and I've solicited the help of a friend of mine, Shelley Humphries, who is a yucca moth and yucca specialist, a researcher, a graduate student studying this fascinating system. Thank you very much for agreeing to help us, Shelley.
Well, hey John, thanks for joining us. Welcome to the world of the yuccas. We got a nice plant here, and actually during the day is a pretty good time to look for moths. You can look in the flowers, and that's pretty much the only place you'll ever find them. They rest there so that they don't desiccate in the heat, but all of the action really happens at night. That's when all the pollination and the egg laying occurs. So why don't we look and see if we've got some moths here, and then if we do, we'll come back tonight and check them out.
Very good, all right. And the younger flowers, the newer ones, are up near the top of the stalks, is that right?
Yeah, then it opens from the bottom to the top, and the best place to look for moths are in the fresh flowers. And actually we have a couple right here.
Oh yes.
There's a female and a male.
Wonderful.
And oh, there's a couple more in this flower right here. I think this will be a good place to come back tonight.
Telling male and female yucca moths apart is tricky, but the females are slightly larger because they are full of eggs.
So here we have a female. She just finished laying an egg. And it looks like she might go to lay another one.
Oh, she's gonna come and do it again, is she?
She might. She's gonna back down. Often they'll walk up and then they'll sort of back down to find the right position. And so she's found her spot now, and she's
laying an egg.
Yeah, she's inserted her ovipositor and she's laying another egg. So this other female's been going for a while. She might pollinate. Here she goes.
Is she gonna come pollinate now?
Yeah, it looks like it.
Oh yeah, all
Very
right.
good. So you can see the tentacles are unrolled.
Zinging her tentacles into the...
Yeah. So The place where the pollen has to go is actually a couple millimeters below the surface, and it can't be put there passively by wiping it across the top. The female actually has to stuff it into the hole. There, she's done.
So the plant can't be accidentally pollinated by other
No.
sorts of insects.
As far as we
Wandering
know,
around
there's no way for other insects to get pollen on their bodies and then brush it across the top, at least for this species. And you can, if you look very carefully, you can see right underneath their eye the sort of the yellow discoloration, and that's actually the pollen that they're carrying that they've collected from different flowers.
And there's just nothing that they get from that act of pollinating except the ensured survival of their larvae.
Yeah, as far as anybody knows, the moths don't have a complete gut tract, so we don't think that they're eating anything. And it looks like all that they're doing is actively pollinating, and the only thing she gets out of it is the home for her children. The original idea that they don't feed was established by Riley back in the 1800s, and he did the original dissections.
Professor Charles Valentine Riley was the first person to realize that the relationship between the yucca and the yucca moth is not only mutually helpful, but also absolutely necessary in order for both species to survive. After many long hours of detailed sketching and careful observation, his account of this remarkable mutualism was published, startling the world of biology. It was such a fine example of what we call coevolution that Riley even sent some yucca moths to Charles Darwin, who had yucca plants growing in his garden. Neither the moths nor the plants thought much of the British climate, mind you, and they never prospered overseas. Still, Riley became famous in a time when all one really needed was patience, some simple tools, a sharp eye, and an inquisitive mind. Now, amazing things are still being discovered this way, but it has become much less fashionable in the current high-tech, highly theoretical scientific climate. Charles Valentine Riley had a rich scientific career in which his yucca moth studies were only a small part.
Do you find that you're inclined at times to draw analogies between human cooperation and how it's really not that cooperative at heart, and the cooperation between moth and yucca?
Well, it looks like a cooperation on the surface, and both the plant and the moth need each other to reproduce sexually, but they're both in it for their own selfish best interests, which is probably what motivates a lot of human cooperation as well. And I think a lot of it is largely on the part of the plant. It's actually capable somehow of detecting how many times moths have laid eggs inside of the flowers. And if a particular flower has received way too many ovipositions, the plant is capable of dropping that flower, and all of the moth eggs that are inside of that flower die.
There you go. So it's a perfectly clear case of the moth being unable to survive without the yucca, and the yucca being unable to survive without the moth.
Yeah. If either the plant or the moth disappeared, neither would be able to reproduce sexually.
Oh, there she's going to come and pollinate again.
Yeah, it looks like there she goes.
Oh, wow. And those tentacles are just so weird.
Look how long that is.
Oh, beautiful. Look at her.
They're
Look at her
pollinating.
stuffing it in there. That is so weird. So very strange.
Summertime, the desert wind, the yuccas bloom at night. Moths fly the pollen round and everything's alright. And the grubs grow strong
while the wind blows along. Summertime, the desert wind, the yuccas bloom at night. Millions of years in the making, marvels revealed to our eyes. Moths with odd tentacled faces, and plants reaching up to the sky. Hey, summertime, the desert wind, the yuccas bloom at night. Moths fly the pollen round and everything's alright. They pollinate, west they cooperate. Out here in the west, moth needs its yucca and the yucca needs its moth. That's what makes genuine yucca moths such ermine-coated, raven-eyed gems of the desert. They're cute, they're useful, and they get along with other folks. Oh, little long little doggy, come visit this bloom and the rest. Roll up a bundle of pollen and make sure this yucca yucks best. Summertime, the desert wind, the yuccas bloom at night. Moths fly the pollen round and everything's alright. And the grubs go strong while the wind blows along. Summertime, the desert wind, the yuccas bloom at night. Each species of yucca depends on a single species of moth, but there are many other sorts of quasi-yucca moths as well. Okay, well, while we're still here, let's take one more moment to look at one more yucca plant and one more yucca moth. You see this moth here? It looks exactly like a regular yucca moth, a Tegeticula yuccacella, but it's not. It has no tentacles. This is a cheater moth, or as the researchers call it, aprovechado, which is Spanish for one who takes advantage. This moth has probably evolved from regular yucca moths that pollinate the yucca, but it doesn't bother pollinating. Ha! It could care less about pollinating. Comes out later than the other yucca moths and waits until the flowers or the plant has decided which flowers are going to turn into fruits, flies to those fruits, lays its eggs in the fruits, and parasitizes the whole system. It's kind of a neat thing from a biology perspective, but from the yucca's perspective, these moths are no better than thrips and aphids. Okay, well, let's leave the land of the yucca behind and return to my old stomping ground, the land of the Alberta rose. I want to put this yucca moth mutualism in perspective here. Both species benefit, but that sort of relationship is actually quite common in nature. You can see it in just about any flower. You know the situation here. The flowers produce nectar in order to attract insects. The insects come to the flowers, they get pollen grains stuck on them, they transport the pollen from the male parts of one flower to the female parts of another flower. That's how the flowers get pollinated. Now, most of the pollinators in this place are flies. There are lots of hover flies here, and some other sorts of flies as well. And you can see, I mean, if you look at them really closely, you can see that they are dusted with pollen. This is exactly what the flower wants, if flowers can want things, which of course they can't. It's just a product of their evolutionary history that they dust pollen on all their flies. But not only flies, I mean, occasionally you'll get butterflies and moths pollinating flowers, not so much in roses, but beetles. Beetles are big pollinators. There's a little longhorn beetle, a black beetle with long antennae. They're not horns, they're antennae. We all know that. And as well, there's a very neat beetle here. Do you remember our scarab beetle show? We looked for various different sorts of scarab beetles. Well, there was one we never found, Trichiotinus, a lovely little flower visiting scarab beetle that feeds on the pollen. It's not so much after the nectar, it's after the pollen as well. And in the process of eating the pollen, they smear the pollen around. They're nifty looking beetles with the very typical sort of scoop-shaped scarab face, and they also mimic bumblebees. They have a striped pattern on them. They buzz around like bumblebees. They tumble around in the flowers like bumblebees. Very, very interesting. Now, of course, the difference between this situation and the yucca situation is that here there are lots and lots and lots of different species of pollinators for each flower, and for the pollinators there are lots and lots of different species of flowers they can visit, and they're perfectly happy. That's what we call a loose mutualism, whereas with the yuccas and the yucca moth there's only one species on either side of the equation. That's a very tight mutualism.
The word ecology means the study of the household, and for most animals and plants, the household is the great outdoors.
Oh, it's a tense time here on the open sand. The green bean guys have gotten into a bit of a dispute with the grape guys, and the green bean guys have formed an alliance with the lemon lime guys. I've often thought that these relationships between nations were very much like ecological relationships among and between species. It's not quite the same thing, but it sure reminds you of it. Yeah, I once took a social studies class in high school. It was called Conflict and Cooperation. It was full of this kind of stuff. The green guys, the green bean guys, and the lemon lime guys, they think they're getting along fine. Ha! Then they catch word of the fact that the lemon lime guys are arranging a little side deal with the grape guys, so the green bean guys do a little end run and surround. It's treachery, it's goofy. It's reminiscent of ecological relationships, but it's not the same thing, because these sorts of interactions are the products of personalities. The interactions in nature are the products of the evolutionary process. That's why I always preferred biology to social studies. That's why I'm a nature nut, and I hope you are too. Ridiculous behavior. Same time each and every week, uncensored and uncut. No doubt about it, I'm a nature nut.